Hi, let's start with a couple of minutes of just kind of setting our motivation. And again, just bringing to mind the highest reason for taking this time together today. That deep wish to be of benefit to all living beings. And then our refuge, which is the reason we're here, is because we actually think that spending time contemplating, studying, and practicing Dharma are the things that are going to fulfill those wishes ultimately. And so maybe in our own way, going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And again, by being here today, listening and talking about the Dharma, contemplating what we learn, and putting it into practice. May those become the cause for us to achieve every realization on the path. Sangye chodong soki chodnam la changchu badu dagmi kyapsu chi dagi jenyan gipe sonam ki chola penche sangye drupa sho sangye chodong soki chodnam la Changchu Badu Dagmi Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chenyan Gipe Sonam Ki Chola Penchir Sangye Drupa Sho Sangye Chodang Soki Chobnam La Changchu Badu Dagmi Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chenyan Gipe Sonam Ki Chola Penchir Sangye Drupa Sho. So, I promised, and I can deliver on that promise. Oh, can I share my screen? I pulled together, and forgive me because I didn't get the verses and the translations that I really wanted to find. I think I'm not sure if that book that you showed last week was, I think it's Geshe Sonam Rinchen. I had that book. Who's the translator on that one? Can't really see. Is it Geshe Sonam Rinchen? Or
No,
is it Tibetan Library Works and Archives?
No, it's mind training. And mind training of the 8 verses by Serme Kinster Lobsang Tarchin.
Okay.
Yes.
I have that one, and I had a translation by Geshe Sonam Rinchen, which I have neither of those now. So it's a thing that I do sometimes, give away Dharma books and then I don't have them anymore. But actually it was all right, because frankly, I really didn't have the time necessarily to like do the transcription. So I pulled a few different versions from the web. And then, so I'll share those. And then if you've got that and want to kind of read that also before we discuss, that would be helpful. I don't know, Michael, if you have any other version. And again, forgive me for not connecting, because it would have been really nice to be able to, so can you see 8 verses for training the mind?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, my TV's still on. I'll be right.
no problem. So I just grabbed, the version that we were looking at last week. And then I just went to the Berzin archives and I grabbed one of his translations, and then also one by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And I think that there's, even, and if you go to the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives, you'll see that Lama Zopa Rinpoche, there was this version that we chatted over, but there had been another version of a translation that he had done before then. And then I'm sure that probably Alex Berzin has translated it multiple times and probably has different iterations. But I do have, and I sent you, Michael, this PowerPoint presentation. So I have the sources, the links to those actually in there. I wanted to mention, again, just how valuable I think this kind of looking at a text, sacred text, and then comparing the translations can be. There was a time, so Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when we first started putting together, FPMT used to use these books, like Essential Buddhist Prayers, and I think it was definitely Thupten Chodron had kind of compiled these prayers, all translated into English with the Tibetan. And I'm not sure actually who did the initial translation, but I know she got those books together. And then as, FPMT growing and growing, there was a need to kind of standardize on something. There were centers all over the world. And so we started putting together these prayer books, and they, came in 3-ring binders, and for a reason, because Lama Zopa Rinpoche would correct or change or make something really specific later. And I will be honest. So, I would memorize a version of something, like the Heart Sutra, a version that I really loved. And then he would change it. And then, of course, also the ego, because I didn't know it anymore when I was with a group of people, whatever iteration that we were on. But, I think it's good to get us to really think about what we're reading. And, not to say that we're not doing that already, but it just provides a little more grist for the mill, more things to contemplate. So I'm not going to go through the first. Well, I might stay on the 4th verse, and forgive me, I'm just whizzing through this. That's where we left off. And I think we kind of chatted quite a bit about it, but I wanted to just open it up because the hour whizzed by last week. And I just wondered if anything, well, actually, I should have, before I got into verse 4 to revisit it, I guess I should open it up more generally to any of these verses, especially the ones that we covered last week. Did anything kind of come to mind or over this last week, or did you get an opportunity to practice any of them?
But Bonnie, for me, I was just constantly reminded every day for various reasons that when you say, what does a verse mean? It means everything it can mean. Right. And so, yes, one translation may stick out at me today, but it's not the right translation, right? It's the translation that's the most meaningful for me at this moment. But in the next moment, another translation may be the translation du jour, because it means everything it can mean.
Yeah. And each one may help open up like a subtle door of understanding for us, right? Which of course, hopefully then leads to a greater ability to practice these things when the opportunity arises, which, to your point, we have lots of opportunities to contemplate and practice these. Were you going to say something also? Sorry.
I don't remember.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Well, anyway, let's just we won't spend a lot of time on this one because we did practice it, but I think it'd be good to revisit it. So verse 4, whenever I see beings who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by negative actions and suffering, I shall hold such rare ones dear as if I had found a precious treasure. Whenever I see beings instinctively cruel, overpowered by negativities and serious problems, may I cherish them as difficult to find as discovering a treasure of gems. And when I see beings of unpleasant character, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I have discovered a jewel treasure. So, we talked a little bit last week about subtle differences like wicked in nature and instinctively cruel, and kind of, revisiting and reminding ourselves that our nature, we have Buddha nature, which is emptiness, which is our availability to become a Buddha. But how we're experiencing ourselves and others because of the defilements that we have, because of our own obscurations and ignorance, is, we're available to experience a wicked nature and things that appear to be instinctively cruel. I would also say, this is like that wheel of life, so long as we're on that, these are the things that we're going to be experiencing. And then, a little bit more gentle, His Holiness, when I see beings of unpleasant character, so that, I don't know, that goes down a little bit easier. It's like, oh, unpleasant and, just unpleasant character. They're not by nature cruel, and they're certainly, not wicked. But also all of them kind of saying, they're overwhelmed, they're oppressed, they're overpowered by their negativity. Yeah, Michael.
The thing that stood out, and I noticed it right away, is like, okay, typical of His Holiness, right? We're going to kind of tone this down. But the other thing that struck me really, really strongly is I would not consider myself wicked in nature. I would not consider myself instinctively cruel. I can be wicked, I can be cruel, but I would not consider that. But when it says just unpleasant character, oh heck, I'm that way every day. Right? And so now I not only have to say when I find those other people to be that way, when I find myself to be that way. Right? Yeah. It's that giving, and it's that lojong, that giving and taking.
Yeah, and that recognition that we're eligible for these situations ourselves, right? And we talked about they're like a precious treasure or a treasure full of gems or wish fulfilling jewel, and they will become more rare. It says difficult to find, right? And we talked about that, like difficult to find and rare, because as we practice that appearance, both to your point, in ourselves, and also how others experiencing them in that way is also going to diminish and become even more rare. So, I kind of, did you want to say something?
My arch nemesis came into the paper today, and oh goodness, it was really odd because I didn't find him. I wasn't angry with him, and I wasn't upset with him, and we had a very, very good conversation. But yeah, something might be rubbing off because I didn't. I didn't tear his head off and kick him out of the shop.
That's the hope, right? That reading these things and discussing them and meditating on them, when we're presented with that opportunity, that we actually can practice these, right? Because I think, frankly, it's amazing to have these aspirations. Like here we've been for countless lives, swimming around in samsara. We have been everything, every nice thing, every nasty thing, but we have this amazing opportunity that we're even attracted to these ideas and able to talk about them, which means we can start to make a change, right? And quite frankly, put a spoke in the wheel of life. Stop that cycle and escape it. So that's wonderful. Wonderful that you had, and I love, I also, like you, will laugh like, oh, my nemesis. I had a few of them over the course of my life. It's so funny. I've had a couple of them, in Dharma contexts, and so it's with tongue in cheek that I say my nemesis. But those people who kind of bring something out in me, right? Who I, for whatever reason, I find their fault. Of course, it's because I have the seeds for these things in my own mind that I'm so irritated, when I see it, in somebody else. But it's wonderful that you had an opportunity to kind of have that experience, and then laughing about it. It takes the power away. Like, oh, our funny minds, someone else becomes, my arch enemy or my nemesis. I know when you say it, like, and especially when you say it laughing like that, it's not true. It's already like the power has already been sucked right out of it, right? So let's just take a minute to kind of reinforce that just quietly. And make a wish, aspiration, that we will be able to remember this verse and all these verses when these situations arise. When we see someone, maybe in person or maybe on the news, that kind of appears to us in this way. May we extract the teaching from them. Verse 5. When out of envy, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like, I shall accept defeat and offer the victory to others. When others out of envy treat me wrongly with scolding, insults, and more, may I accept the loss upon myself and offer the victory to others. When others out of jealousy treat me wrongly with abuse, slander, and scorn, may I take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory. So one thing that stands out to me is, out of envy. So kind of, ascribing some motivation to someone else, which is interesting because we can't see what's in someone else's mind. But we do know that so often this is how even our own minds operate, right? Like we see, and I think it's kind of by extrapolating from our own behavior that we can kind of come to some conclusion that it's out of envy or jealousy. Although I think this verse, the second part is true regardless of the motivation. But I think it helps to think about looking at my own mind. What happens, honestly, what happens when someone else is demonstrating really wonderful qualities? So there's those people that we initially, that we kind of look up to as mentors or teachers or people who we are quite happy to take guidance from. And those people, when they demonstrate wonderful qualities, then we rejoice. We admire them very openly and happily. When people that we love and like demonstrate good qualities, have something wonderful happen to them, for them, again, it's very easy for us to feel joy and rejoice in their good fortune and rejoice in their good qualities. Then when you get to those people that we're neutral about, I think, at least if I'm honest, I can look at my mind when I will make a negative comment about someone else. It often is, whether I'm making it, whether I'm sharing it with someone, which is, worse than thinking it, but also thinking it is not so great. But when I'm critical of others, when I'm, kind of in my mind, even insulting someone, and certainly if I'm kind of pointing out some kind of fault, or some kind of scorn or putting someone down, typically it's because there's something I need to point out when they're demonstrating good qualities. The competition or comparison, I think, can sometimes cause a person to chime in with something negative. So say you're working with someone and they do a great job, and they're being praised by someone. Maybe I did something recently and I did a great job and I don't feel like I got praised enough. So now I'm hearing them getting praised. So I might have to add oh yes, but, I might have to pick apart or identify some fault. And I think these are, and it's not like it's rampant. It's not like it's something that we're doing all the time, or that I'm, running around doing this all the time. But when that inclination even comes up, it's often around something like this, where I'm feeling jealous, where I'm feeling envious that other people are admiring someone else instead of, oh, they're not admiring the great and mighty, me. And so I think out of that, we can extrapolate, if we're looking at our own minds, like when we feel that way, when we feel inclined to find fault, when we feel inclined to point out someone else's mistakes or insult someone, what's really going on with us? And I think, it's not a far cry to say maybe sometimes there's some kind of jealousy or envy. And it's funny because going back to this whole thing of, nemesis. So I have had in, and I'll playfully admit, because it isn't super heavy, but it's good to see that my own mind would get like this, someone else, we used to organize these long life pujas, and inevitably, there were some of us that worked really, really hard on them. And then some others kind of didn't do as much. But then on the day of the puja, one person in particular who didn't really do so much, and also they were ordained, and everybody would come around like, oh, you did such a wonderful job. And it just drove me insane because I thought that person hasn't really done anything, And so I mean, fortunately, I knew enough that I didn't vocalize it. I didn't share my thoughts, but internally, which is also not good. I was having these thoughts, super critical, identifying everything that was wrong with this person in my own mind. And then actually one day, I just realized that the virtuous thing that I thought I was doing purely was I was looking for like a gold star. I was looking to get credit for my good deed. And I just, I caught myself like, wow, why am I having these feelings or these thoughts towards this person? This person is an amazing person, an amazing practitioner, a great example in so many ways. And why am I nitpicking? And it was because I wanted credit. It was my envy and jealousy that other people were admiring her. And, heaven forbid the Lama should think that she did it, when I did it. And when I realized it, I immediately regretted. I immediately did 4 powers. And the very next day, for the first time, and I've only had a few of them, but for the first time, Lama Zopa Rinpoche called me on the phone. And he said, I've been calling you with my mind. And I said, and I thought, I know why you couldn't get through. It was because I had this horrible negative mind that I wanted something, I wasn't doing something purely. So that's just an example for me, but I think it's easy to kind of imagine that when someone, and this is what our parents tell us, when someone is, when you're a child and they're teasing you or, bullying you, it's always the parents' response, like they're probably jealous, right? So I think there's something that we just kind of know that unfortunately, that feeling of jealousy gives rise to some of this kind of behavior. And so then the next bit, accepting defeat and offering the victory, or accepting the loss and offering the victory to others. Why begrudge someone else? Again, it's like something nice is happening for someone. And then this idea of begrudging is such a stingy, kind of selfish feeling. You feel dirty, when you catch yourself doing it, you feel really yucky. And like in that case, like there's enough appreciation and there's enough love to go around. I didn't have to begrudge this person credit. Maybe they didn't do as much as I did, but it's not like they did nothing. It's not like they didn't deserve it. And so instead, deciding, being happy for that person, offering it to them, let them take that credit. Being glad that they got something that that is making them happy, offering the victory, and then just accepting, okay, I'm not having it this time. But it's back to that, 8 worldly dharmas, and of course, we all love to have praise. We all love to have good reputations, but we can't love those things so much that we're willing to do something negative with our body, speech, or mind, right? Because then we're just continuing that cycle and creating the causes for more of it. So when the situation arises that someone else has that, to just offer it to them, to be happy that they have this praise, or if it's a material thing, whatever it is that they have, being happy, offering the victory to them, and then just accepting the loss with some kind of grace, and really being happy that someone else has it, and rejoicing in them having this is going to create the causes for us to have it. When you do actions like in relation to your teachers, they're very heavy karmically. So sometimes, they appear to have the result very quickly, and in that case, I felt like when I finally just realized my own stupidity and just internally, acknowledge. And in fact, I actually told a friend, I confessed that I was having these negative feelings, and it opened up the opportunity for my Lama to reach out to me. So, that's just an example, but I think, these have real results and ramifications practicing these things. So I'll stop and see if anybody else, sorry, I'm always sharing like the little stories, but I don't know, to me, it brings it to life. Like, okay, this is a time when I wasn't practicing, and this is how it felt. And this is when I shifted and I remembered the Dharma, and it changed qualitatively. Any comments or thoughts?
Bonnie, for me, it's what really changed tonight is number one is that may I accept the loss upon myself. The first half of the verse can be translated a little bit differently depending on who you would, but they all say, may I accept the loss upon myself and give the victory to others. And I've always interpreted that as forgiveness is not the right word. So while we were talking, I was actually looking up some synonyms for forgiveness, and they include grace and compassion and mercy. And the reason forgiveness isn't the right because every night we do the Vajrasattva practice with Venerable Katie. So we're not asking Guru Vajrasattva for forgiveness. We're using those tools to forgive ourselves, right? So I always interpret that as as offering the victory to them, as offering forgiveness to them. But what you said is really different. It's not just offering them the victory, it's rejoicing in that victory.
Well, that's really when we're offering, right? I mean, you think about it like, if you've ever heard of like the actions, the 4 ways of making a karma like complete. Like one is like, being happy that you did it, right? So it's like, doing these actions with like a mind that is not rejoicing is not really making the offering, right? And in the example I used, I wasn't really making the offering for a different reason because I wasn't really rejoicing either. I had some other motivation, right? But
right, I'm happy for you, and I offer you forgiveness, as opposed to I'm happy for you.
Period. Yes.
Yeah.
My thought was, is it actually a loss? If you get down to the nitty gritty, is it actually a loss?
So right.
Yeah.
Lama Zopa Rinpoche, there's a book, and I think I've referenced it before, Transforming Problems into Happiness. I mean, this is the thing. You can radically transform your own experience of something. And then it's like, well, maybe I'm accepting that I'm not getting something, but that isn't the same as a loss. And actually, it's a gain if I'm able to like rejoice that someone else has something. Now, and now I've created, now it's the best of all worlds, right? Being joyful for someone else, whether it's victory in this verse, that's what we're talking about, but just generally like good things happening for and to someone else, offering that, with joy, and then accepting that this time it's not my turn, maybe not even noticing that at some point. How nice to have the mind that wouldn't even experience that.
Exactly.
And right, and we can get there.
Absolutely. I wanted to share that I've had to banish the word jealousy and envy from my vocabulary, because I found that, well, words have meanings. And when I would say, oh, I'm so jealous, or, oh man, I'm envious of you, it didn't matter how much love I put into it, that word was still, creeping into it. That green envy, was creeping into my thoughts and mind. So yeah, those words, I don't like to use them.
That's actually really good. When I'm being very mindful, I will watch, like sometimes I'll say, I will say words for some kind of emphasis, which is not what they mean. But you're right, like it's a subtle imprint. What we really want to say is, I'm so happy for you. And sometimes that feels almost too intimate. But I think when we're able to really go there, it really is lovely to be on the receiving end of that. And it can really totally transform relationships. Just being vulnerable enough to really say, I'm really happy for you, and mean it. Sometimes we mean it, but it just feels like, oh, that's so intimate to say, like, yeah.
No, but saying it again, that's an imprint, by saying it, eventually you will mean it.
Yeah. And creating a habit of that, right? Creating a habit of that. So, I think the one thing that we really didn't focus on here is the middle part, which is being abused or insulted, being scorned, all of those things. And I think when we're experiencing those, then it's really harder, right? So this verse applies in so many situations. We can see, there's a lot of meaning chalked in each one of these verses. But so we talked about, when it's someone that you admire or someone you care about, easy. When it's neutral person, maybe not always so easy. when it's a person who is treating us poorly like this, actively treating us poorly, then I think then that's when it's really challenging. And so, I always think offering the victory, what does that look like? And I think with some kind of spiritual intelligence, we have to, as we are practicing these, we don't want to regret the good things that we do. Again, because, regret is one of the 4 powers that will destroy the karma, damage the karma that we've created. We want that with the negative stuff, but not with the good stuff. And so, if I'm being treated poorly, I may not be able to outwardly offer the victory, but in my mind, right? And so what am I saying? Like, have you ever done something? Have you ever tried to be the bigger person? Just imagine, somebody does something really crappy to you, and you're just like, I'm just going to be the bigger person. So you extend this olive branch, and they basically just like smack it out of your hand, either don't accept it, or they accept it with some kind of glee, like, well, of course, I know you were wrong. And, thank goodness you recognized it, right? Like there's those sorts of situations. Like you can imagine, it might be difficult to sustain your offering the victory, right? So maybe wiser to, as we're, maybe not able to wholeheartedly rejoice and offer the victory to them, at least in our minds, to say, cause and effect. They're experiencing some pleasure, even to think they're experiencing pleasure out of harming me. They're experiencing some pleasure out of insulting me. I want them to have pleasure. I want them to have happiness. I understand that this is not ultimately a cause for happiness. So the happiness part, I'm glad they have. But I know they're creating a cycle. And that's where the, whether it's forgiveness, compassion, really understanding comes in. So let them have this moment. Let them have this thing. And then actually, accepting that the only reason that I can be experiencing this is I must have created the causes for it at some point in time, right? So I think, again, that's when it gets harder, when they're treating me wrongly, when it feels, and we're going to get more into this. So I won't go there yet, but yeah, yeah, exactly. So, let's just think about this, contemplate this verse for a minute or two. Try to imagine, try to bring to mind a challenging situation, not an easy one. Or looking back in our life when maybe we did encounter a circumstance like this. And can we look back now with this mindset, offering the victory, accepting the loss? So moving on to the next verse. You can see it's getting harder, like, oh, the stakes are getting higher. when someone whom I've benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I shall regard that person as my holy guru. Even if someone whom I've helped and from whom I harbor great expectations were to harm me completely wrongly, may I view him or her as a hallowed teacher. When someone whom I've helped or in whom I've placed great hopes mistreats me in extremely hurtful ways, may I regard him still as my precious teacher. So this, well, let me open it up first of all to see if anything kind of comes to mind for you. If you have any thoughts or feelings on this verse. Or if you want to share another translation, if you've got one handy. Are you saying something, Michael?
Oh, sorry. Another translation, when someone who I have befriended with great hope, right? And so it's really, it's not just I've given them the benefit of the doubt, but it's really I've taken them in. But again, for me, it's a matter of regardless of who that person is, regardless of how, we always talk about, okay, on the left side of the people we care about, on the right side of the people we're indifferent to, or in the front of us are people we're indifferent to, on the right side of the people that we don't really care about, right? It doesn't matter who that person is. I need to regard that person as my, and what really stood out is the very first one you wrote from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, which I have not read before, as I have to regard that person as my holy guru.
Yeah. Shelley, were you going to say something also?
Yeah, I was going to read you this one. May I view one whom I greatly hoped would help me, but instead mistreats or even harms me as my greatest spiritual teacher. I think it goes back to what's really going on in their mind for them to treat you this way. What fear, what anger, what are they experiencing in their life that's, because, well, there are people out there who just like to cause chaos and to be vindictive and mean, but usually yeah, but
Here too.
but for the most part, not people don't like being mean. They don't like so it seems to me that if somebody's mistreating me, there's something else going on. It might not have anything to do with me. So
yeah. So that compassion towards that other, the fact that suffering is what's behind those kinds of negative actions. Even when I talk about jealousy, that's a kind of suffering, right? It's a feeling of deprivation, whatever it is. Understanding that suffering comes from negativities, and that negativities breed suffering, right? It's that cycle. It not only applies to others, but it applies to me as well, right? So as I come to understand my own mind, then being able to extend that kind of understanding and compassion towards others. And sometimes it works the other way around. You're looking at someone else and you have understanding and compassion for them, which helps you to have greater insight into your own, where's it coming from with me? What I think is interesting about this is, and they all start, someone whom I've helped and place great hopes. So to me, it's a little bit of a tip off that I've done something positive, but it was contaminated. It was an exchange. It wasn't a pure offering, right? It's not, I am your friend because I love you and I am your friend. It is, I am your friend. I've put a lot of hope in you, right? I expect something back. You know, they're all saying, I harbor great expectations. I think this is pointing, you know, this verse, and again, you know, I've read lots of different commentaries, and so this might just be my take. So, you know, we're just kind of talking about what's coming up. But for me, what's coming up is just this understanding of this exchange, that my mind, you know, and then what? And then what happens? I don't get what I wanted. Right? I don't get what I wanted. They've betrayed me. They're hurting me. They're not holding up their end of the bargain. You know, it's a tip off that, why does that hurt more? It hurts more because I did something for them and I had that expectation. Oh, wow. What if I took away the expectation? What if I just acted purely? You know, my helping someone is genuinely because I want to help them. And then what if I watch myself and my own boundaries, so I'm not doing things that I'm going to regret, when I'm just trying to incrementally stretch my capacity to freely and genuinely, you know, give help or material things or whatever it is, friendship, and trying to stop myself from that second part, which is honestly what makes this hurt more, right? Like, if I haven't helped you, if I didn't have those expectations, then, well, you know, beings are out there suffering, you know, they're going to harm out of delusion. They will harm themselves. They have. I harm myself. I continue to create the causes for samsara. You know, Master Shantideva was like, hey, what do you expect? You know, they'll harm themselves. Of course they're going to harm me. You know, how can I have that expectation? Right? And it's not even out of malice. It's just out of ignorance. Sometimes may seem like malice. And I think that's really one of the ways that they can function as your highest teacher. Like pointing out where our actions, where our good deeds have been contaminated by something else. These great hopes, this expectation of something in return. Like, and look, it's human. So it's not like we're bad because we have these things, but they don't serve us, right? They just keep the cycle going. So having this situation arise, it shows us something about our own minds, I think. And then I would also say, when we try to use a person like that as our guru, to see it as a teaching, it functions. It does teach us something, you know. There's a couple other, and they're sort of in the Lojong. So Wheel of Sharp Weapons is another text, Peacock in the Poison Grove, you know, all these things, you know, some of my favorite, I think they're like hardcore. You know, I've said to people, if you're really feeling strong, when the poop hits the fan, read Wheel of Sharp Weapons, you know, because it puts the blame where it belongs, which is not on me. No, it's on self-cherishing, it's on self-grasping, it's on that ignorance. And so in that practice, you're praying like Yamantaka, like, come on, stomp on the head, you know, like smash, bang, you know, kick the butt of the one who created all these problems that are coming at me. This boomerang, this wheel of sharp weapons that's coming back in the form of someone doing something terrible. Let me recognize, you know, Yamantaka, or some people say Yamantaka, it's a Sanskrit thing, but it's the wrathful manifestation of Manjushri. It is wisdom. It is powerful, wrathful wisdom. And so, you know, sometimes we can handle being wrathful with ourselves. Sometimes we need a little more gentleness. But when you're up for it and the poop hits the fan, you know, pull out that text, sit down and recite it. It doesn't take that long. It's a couple of hours. But, you know, you come to the end and it's like, okay, now I know what the real enemy is. And so this is like, you know, I've made prayers. Help me to identify the real enemy. help me to identify the causes of my suffering. And then, it happens and it's like, oh, Yamantika, not like that. Yes, I read Wheel of Sharp Weapons. Yes, I'm begging you, help me destroy the ego, grasping, clinging, but ouch, this hurts, right? And it will hurt sometimes, right? But if we are brave, spiritual warriors, right? Bodhisattvas, aspiring bodhisattvas, if we are and we can do that, it really does transform us. And it really does, we really can look back and say, that was a blessing. That was the blessing of the guru. And, certainly the blessing of the guru to even be able to look at it like that, right? So I just talked a lot, but I don't know. Any comments or thoughts?
For me,
Sorry, go ahead, Shayla.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say and then this will be good for you and the saucy one. Just when you get to the past can hurt, every time I always hear that, I always think of the Lion King, where he has Simba thinking about the past, and he hits him on the head with a stick. He goes, "Oh, that hurts." He goes, "Yes, sometimes the past can hurt." That doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean you don't move forward. It just means, yeah, sometimes the past can hurt.
Shella, were you going to say something also?
Yeah, but it's completely gone. I think I was trying. Oh, it was. He's laughing at me. I have the worst memory. It's about. I had an idea of maybe just reminding myself that when you do something for somebody, it always has to be without strings, and it just has to be out of pure love. And then once the gift is given, walk away. That's what I have to. I think that's one thing that I'll need to remind myself over and over again.
I think it's a thing that we do have to remind ourselves over and over again, right? And it's like untangling, like love and attachment, right? Like decoupling those things. That's like our job. And so when we know our motivations, we might have to like adjust, like, okay, what can I do purely? What can I do purely and happily? And I've said it before, I found when I first became a Buddhist, of course, I would have been ready to give away everything because, that's where you are. But, I would have regretted it. And I've watched people do it. I've watched people stretch themselves beyond what they could do. And that's why Master Shantideva says, start with like carrots and potatoes or, small things, right? And gradually, aspire to being able to do more, but do what you can do happily and then move forward, increase that incrementally, and then we can get somewhere. Yeah, Michael.
As Shayla said that, and you were kind of re-emphasizing it, I thought, but wouldn't it be nice if I could be like His Holiness, right? I bet His Holiness doesn't have to remind himself very often about these things. I bet Garchen Rinpoche or the Karmapa, I bet you they don't have to remind themselves so often, right? So wouldn't it be nice if I could do these things without reminding myself of the other side? Yes.
And we can get there, right? But we can't jump over where we are, we want to. We want to so badly, and forgive me, and I probably have said it in this forum before, it sounds so sacrilegious, but like if all it took, all right, it does sound sacrilegious, but I mean it. If what it took was one day to be nailed to a cross, paraded around, beaten, scorned, crown of thorns, if it took a grand gesture, like even an incredibly grand gesture, burn me at the stake, whatever. I think that there have been moments when maybe we could muster that up, right? But it's for a moment. We can muster it for a moment. the point is like to really transform our minds. And that is like just the daily little things, responding to them in a different way, looking at our minds, checking our motivation, gosh, I wish we could just be one grand gesture and not this, incremental project, right? This path to enlightenment that we're on, which is seemingly taking a really long time, right? But, looking at all the examples you gave, Michael, like they got there and they weren't always like that, they weren't always like that. So they'll tell us, right? So, and yeah, we're making some progress. Hopefully.
They'll tell us they're still not like that, right?
And
Out of
maybe they're enlightened, or maybe
they.
they.
I don't believe they fake it. I don't believe they're faking it when they say that. I believe they really think that.
Well, I think it gets subtler and subtler, right? And the more you know your mind, the more you know those little places where it hides out. I'll just say, I'll share another personal thing. There was one of the last times I saw Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and he was teaching, and I just had this awareness that I am going to, and that what I'm doing in some way is like dancing around the Dharma. I'm making changes, but it is incremental. And there are pockets of me, there are pockets of my ego, there's pockets of junk that I am not willingly going to change. And it was like in that moment, I was like, so like Yamantika, so Lama Zopa, Holy Guru, rip it away, which means it's going to hurt. Right? Because I'm not willingly going to stop being Bonnie, the small person that I am. So long as I'm hanging on to Bonnie, there's no Vajrayogini, there's no Buddha available. I can't be that so long as I'm hanging on to being this. And so being willing to really transform and being open and then praying, like just having one moment of awareness where I was like brave enough, like, okay, right now I realize I'm not going to do it. So rip it away. And I know it's going to hurt. I know it's going to hurt. And it isn't going to hurt once. It isn't going to be one grand gesture. It's going to be lots of incremental things that transform us.
And sometimes I get there willingly, and sometimes I get there kicking and screaming.
Yes.
Right? You
Yes.
guys earlier, two of you earlier said something about being grandparents, right? So we're all parents, and we know that that's there. Sometimes our kids got there on their own, and sometimes they got there kicking and screaming. And
yes,
that same thing is true with our grandkids, and sometimes that same thing is true for ourselves.
So true, so true. And our lamas, and that's why it can be our holy guru, the one that points out where I'm contaminated, where I'm motivated by negative things, the one who shows me that clearly, the one who shows me how painful that is. That person is my holy guru. They have truly taught me something that I need to know. And it's through that we'll change, and we'll give up those things that are not serving us. They're just not. And I'm looking and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 7 o'clock. These verses, we really only did 2, and we haven't even really stopped to pause. So I would really like to go out on this note, and there's one more Tuesday. But yeah, like this is what, if we're practicing these things, this is the guru. This is the guru showing us we can never be harmed. Something that is virtuous, something that is pure is never going to bring us harm. So when we're experiencing that, understanding where it came from, and then being willing to let go of those things, and being willing to experience that growth, which can be painful, even as we hope for it not to be too painful. So it just came to my mind. I think it's funny. I remember once someone who was really close to the Lama was sharing a story of, and it was kind of horrible. Like the Lama basically was calling them on their stuff, which, doesn't happen really unless you're usually pretty close to the Lama. And I remember thinking and saying, oh my gosh, you are so fortunate. And then at the same time, like, oh my gosh, thank goodness it's not me. Like, what do I mean? So I had some kind of wisdom that understood this is a great, good fortune. This is amazing. But then also the fear of like, oh, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. Anyway, so let's take a minute to do just a meditation on that, which is really, I think this verse is really transforming something negative into the Dharma, into something positive. So whatever understanding that we've touched, really let it soak in. And we're so incredibly fortunate to be here, to be exposed to these teachings, to be not just have even one translation, have so many different translations, different versions that can kind of help us to move our minds, develop a deeper understanding. And how amazing that we have a Dharma center that provides the infrastructure for us to be able to be here together. And to have each other and good Dharma friends, people on the path to help us, inspire us to appear as the guru in the good and the difficult ways. And so let's dedicate the time that we've spent and our practice towards developing all the realizations on the path so that we just can actually give up these practices because we won't need them anymore. May we perfect them until we no longer need them. And may all of our Dharma friends have long and healthy lives. May all of our teachers flourish, and may the teachings of the Buddha, Lama Zopa, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, any being who's turning the holy wheel of Dharma, may all their wishes be fulfilled. And may we become beings who live to serve every other living being perfectly, achieving all the realizations of the path. Thank you so much. these are so meaty. I love these verses.
I've really enjoyed these classes. I hope we can continue. It's been incredible.
Bonnie, I have to tell you, I've done a lot of these BYOT things, and this is the first time I felt like I needed to pull out my insurance card and send a copy of my insurance card and my copay to you. As my
It's not me. Yes, you're long.
I'm just saying, it's the first time I thought you need to reach into your wallet, send her a copy of your copay, or give her your copay, send her a copy of your insurance card, and let her bill, because this was therapeutic.
You're so funny. But you know, this is the Buddha. This is Buddha's teachings. This is how we become our own therapist. This is how we get it together, you know, in the trenches, practicing this stuff. And I'm grateful to be in the trenches with you guys. Seriously, thank you so much. I'm super grateful. And it's so like, wow, thank you. Sharing with you puts it really top of mind for me too. So I'm right there with you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great rest of the week. I hate to end this. I got to tell you, can't wait till next week.
Thanks, Bonnie. See you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.